Okay, Senator Bukowski.
I'll just remind my colleague and everyone that I saw Assemblymember, now City Council Blumenfield, who authored the legislation that killed redevelopment, but also authored the second piece of legislation that had to pass through after 1 year and would reestablish because of the way that redevelopments were. And we were sued by the League of Cities and the counties who took us to court and sued us and lost everything. So I know that we have a charge right now to try to have an affordable housing pot, but since we have folks here, remember, it was that lawsuit that put the nail in the coffin, because we had a 1 year ransom because we had to do it based on that. But I think I heard you say, Director Boatman Patterson, you're doing a lot of dollars and in amounts. And I think you said there's been 30,000 affordable units that have been built since 1978?
Those are that's in our portfolio where we're the first lien lender.
Okay, so there were additional units.
Oh, yes, there's been much more units, but I'm talking about within CalHFA's portfolio as a first lien lender.
Okay, so we don't have enough money. Everybody agrees to that. As a former city council member, I know how politicians love to get up and say, we have a first-time home buyer's house build program, and it makes everybody feel good, and it is a big lottery. There are 12 million people that sign up, and we court around the three winners that have their home and say, here are these low-income people that are buying a house in my community, and I'm guilty. I'm guilty of it. But it seems to me that we could build more actual units if we put our energy and our staff resources into the multifamily units, because while it makes us all feel good on TV that we have a home owner, really what people need is a shelter. And whether it's a homeless or just plain regular poor people. Am I wrong on
Well,
this?
let me speak to that. Up until about a year ago, we allowed down payment assistance to go out without our first mortgage. There is no other housing finance agency in the nation that would allow that to happen. It is like the state of California, giving money to Bank of America to promote their programs. So about a year ago, I retooled that so that the housing, the actual recycled money that was coming in for down payment assistance got paired with my first mortgage, which I think is a wise and beneficial thing to do, because I know that mortgage that's going to that person is creating a homeowner that is going to, in some instances, there are a lot of places in California, and we have the data that shows this, it is cheaper to be a homeowner than it is to be a renter. Several places in California, and I can provide you all with that data. So if I can, for very little state investment, provide down payment assistance and get a homeowner who now gets to generate and create long-term wealth, and that homeowner is paying less for a mortgage than they are for rent, then I think that's a good state investment. And I'll tell you, one of the things that in my going around and looking at all the various down payment assistance programs that were offered by every little local government, I thought that was an inefficient use of resources. And if you're going to have a down payment assistance program, and it's going to be a state investment of down payment assistance program, it should be a down payment assistance program that gets paired with your state affordable housing bank's mortgage, so that money gets recycled and goes back to additional home ownership programs.
All right. Thank you. Senator Allen has a question, please.
Well, okay, first of all, could you just clarify a little bit more about this idea that every county gets a base grant of funding? Is this something you're actually proposing to? What exactly was Mike talking about there?
Senator McGuire made a comment about it. Can you explain it for us?
That the formula allocation will be changed for future rounds of ESG. We've just promulgated regulations now. And I could get staff to give you the actual, the way that it's going to get calculated. But what Senator McGuire was saying is that a portion of it now is distributed to all eligible applicants, and then there's a competitive pot as well. And the reason that that's helpful is that it actually, the little bit of money helps with some of the systems changes issues that all these counties need to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it. I respect, very much respect the challenges that have been brought up by Senator McGuire. I just want to remind Senator McGuire and my good friend and everybody else, but we've got a county out there with 1,000 people total. And, LA gets a lot of money
Talking about
because
Alpine
there's
County.
so many people. I mean, there's 10 million people, and the infrastructure is just straining at the seams. And we've got the worst housing affordability to, housing costs to salary ratio in the entire nation. And it's part of why we've got all the enormous infrastructural challenges that we have. So I would just, I know we're going to figure out a fair methodology that's going to make it work for everybody, but, and we certainly don't want to pit urban against rural, but, the fact is that we have a lot of situations where we're spending a lot of money in some parts of the state where there just simply aren't very many people. And I understand that's because there are oftentimes extra infrastructural challenges associated, but I hope that this doesn't, it seems a little curious to me when they were guaranteeing a minimum when we've got some counties that are literally the size of a couple blocks in Los Angeles. So that's just a thought. The other thing I wanted to just ask you, and Ben, this is just a kind of a more philosophical question. I was looking at your bio, very impressed. Love your first name, first of all. And I just wanted to, you've spent a lot of time in Washington. What do you think we ought to know about HUD and the way Washington approaches housing policy that today that you think folks in Sacramento are maybe not aware of? So it's a broad question, but but love you to reflect on your transition.
So number one, the cavalry is not coming to the rescue. Yeah. Federal funding on a per capita basis has been dropping precipitously over the last several years. There's nothing that I see in the tea leaves in the immediate future that's going to change that. So it does mean that I think states are being asked explicitly and implicitly to step up more, number one. Number two, where you do see new federal funding, it is really only in the context of these very collaborative interagency efforts that really are trying to deal with what I sometimes call double bottom line, whether that's in the homeless veteran arena where you're seeing offsets to the Veterans Affairs, whether that's in the natural disaster arena where you're seeing offsets to expenditures that are being paid for in other sectors. I think that's where you're going to continue to see the feds more involved. And I actually think California can and has been pretty well poised to step up into those opportunities and take advantage of them.
Okay,
Thank you.
it seems like on the federal level, it would be in the national interest to fight homelessness. Is that?
Yeah, and I will say
it
that
seems
this-
like that would be one area the federal government, if they just ignore, would be, kind of against, a broad,
Homelessness.
goal for our country if they do not do anything. If they just said, pass the buck to the states.
I think that's great. Homelessness has historically enjoyed very strong bipartisan support. Certainly, President George W. Bush was a big supporter on a lot of homelessness programs. And this president just came out with his federal budget proposal a month ago, calling for $11 billion in new money to actually, if enacted, would actually put this country on track to end family homelessness over a period of time. So I think you see support, again, both bipartisan, certainly from this president on this matter, but it has been very hard to move things through the appropriations committees of any magnitude.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. Senator McGuire, you have another question? We're going to get to their panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Just
Go
a
ahead.
quick comment. I agree that the conversation should not be about urban versus rural because what we know is the need exists in all corners of the state, right? I mean, the city of LA spends $100 million a year on homelessness. The state of California is only bringing forward $30 million in matching funds in most cases. $30 million for this state. And where I think that the conversation needs to be is rather than, it's not about pitting one against the other, it's about actually allocating dollars to be able to combat this crisis that we have in our communities. I think, and that is why I think the bond is moving forward with the pro tem. And one of the items that we are going to be circulating, and I think it's going to be important that we have both urban and rural on this, is asking for a doubling of the ESG grant, which takes us to $60 million.
Okay.
Now that $30 million, by the way, is an increase in where it was. Again, it's a pittance, and it's absolutely embarrassing.
All right.
So I'll get off my soapbox, Mr. Chair, but would be honored to work with Mr. Allen on this one as well.
Well, I just want to say, Senator McGuire, this morning I came to work very early, about 7 o'clock, and I walked in the office and the phone rang, so I picked it up and I said, hello? And this man said, Senator, we want you to support the state of Jefferson. at 7 o'clock this morning, and there's actually a bill to support the secession of Northern California counties from the state of California. And he wanted me to support that, and I don't know. I said, I'll think about it.
Transfer it
I
into
don't
Senator
know.
Allen's office. Say, there we go.
I might end up voting for that bill. We'll see. Okay. Thank you. We'll get the next panel, and we thank this panel and welcome Ben Metcalf to the state of California. Thank you, Tia, for all your hard work. We'll move to the next panel on status of affordable housing construction financing. We have a good group of people that have worked on this. Carol Galante is here. Linda Manalini, who I worked with Carol and Linda, so I know both of them. And Richard Gentry from San Diego. So welcome, the three of you. And I don't know who's first. Carol? Carol's first? Okay, Carol Galante is our professor at UC Berkeley, but most people know her as the creator of Bridge Housing nonprofit, so that's how we know her. Okay, Carol, you have the floor.
Is this on, is that turning on? Yeah.
Yeah, you're set. Yeah. She's built a lot of housing.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Bell and members of the committee for inviting me and for holding this important hearing on California affordability issues. It's nice for me to be back in California. I've been back about a year from working for the Obama administration as well, and had the pleasure of working with Mr. Metcalf both at Bridge and at HUD. So you have yourself a great new team member here in California. Today, I'd like to take a moment to amplify and frame some of the challenges outlined in the excellent paper that the staff passed around. And based on some of the remarks I just recently heard here, I know that you're well acquainted with the challenges. But I'd like to do that and then take a minute to talk about a few emergency or immediate measures that I think the state could take to ease the situation. But knowing that my fellow panelists also have some excellent measures to suggest, I'd like to spend the balance of my remarks on the need for more comprehensive changes, without which I do not think we will ultimately be able to successfully address the affordability challenges ahead of us. Now, we know when you see a slide like this, we have a huge problem when 20 of the 30 U.S. cities with the highest rents are in California, and a number of those are in the Bay Area, which is also one of the prime engines of the state's jobs and economic growth. There are five interrelated reasons from my perspective that I want to just touch on. And a number of you have mentioned these, but we're not building enough, we're not building fast enough, and a lot of that has to do with our planning approvals process. Our tax policy is dramatically skewed away from producing housing, particularly housing that's affordable. And in part, as a result of these first two reasons, it's very costly to build in California, including the need for private developers to private development to pay its way because the public infrastructure is no longer available without those fees and exactions to enable that development to happen. And at the same time, we have this incredible surge of demand, particularly because of the job growth. I know the Bay Area numbers better than statewide, but Bay Area, we've generated something like 500,000 new jobs since the recession and 50,000 units. That's a mismatch that just is dramatic. And this demand surges, especially in the rental category, given some of the demographic changes we're seeing in the state, as well as a result of some of the recession. And then, of course, I'll show a slide on the fact that while you've got a surging demand and higher costs, you've got incomes that are stagnant or declining. This slide I wanted to show because this perfect storm didn't happen overnight. This comes from the LAO report of 2015. But I think if I could point you to that dark line, the California coast, and you can see around the 1970s, while other places increased housing resource, the California coast continued to decline. And as economists would say, I wouldn't say this is a causation, but there's at least a correlation here with the fact that this California Environmental Quality Act and Prop 13 were both passed in 1970 and 1976. So there is some correlation to this lack of production with factors presented in the state going all the way back to the mid-70s. Now, the results are not just a problem for affordability in general. I do want to emphasize that this is a problem for the environment and equity concerns for our next generation. We are not going to be able to meet our climate change goals, our very ambitious climate change goals, unless we are building in urban infill areas. And when you have these kinds of zoning restrictions and process restrictions that don't enable housing to get built in those areas, we are on a collision course in terms of meeting both affordability goals and climate change goals. Two other quick slides here just to show you the dramatic picture of our underproduction based on our population demand. The blue line is multifamily permits. The gray line is single family. But of course, household growth is totally outstripping our supply. We've had a little bit of an upsurge here in 2013 and 2014, and I'm sure in 2015, but nothing compared to the needs. And then this slide is even more dramatic. We had declining incomes throughout the recession, and really starting in 2013, rental rates in California just have gone off the chart. And if you did this for 2015, I'm sure it would be even more dramatic. So just my view of what we must do, we've got to change the rules to change the outcomes. And I know these are difficult challenges, but just on land use and fiscal barriers, two things that are in control of the legislature, I would say, is immediate CEQA reforms are absolutely necessary. I actually think much more fundamental changes in CEQA are needed, but at a minimum, we need to stop the litigation abuse of CEQA for non-environmental purposes and not allow rescission of project approvals if they are consistent with our SB 375 climate change goals, and requiring only ministerial approvals not subject to CEQA where the state wants to drive growth for climate change. And just one quick example in Berkeley, where a project that was in a high priority development area for the Bay Area Regional Plan, met all the requirements, approved by the City Council, Planning Commission, Zoning Board, but you know, neighbors can go down and sue for $100 or something like that and stop a project. And this is an area, a specific plan area that calls for thousands of units under the Plan Bay Area climate change goals, and yet that project is not moving forward. Secondly, I would say we need to reward cities and hold them accountable for requiring delivery of units, not just planning for them, not just zoning for them, but actually delivering them in order to receive various forms of other state funding. And I think we need to consider stronger accountability to approve projects that meet affordability goals by having some other body maybe that can be a cover for local government when it's needed to get these kinds of approvals done. So I'm not going to talk about the other ones on this list because I know other panelists have comments on these. The last thing, and you know, now that I'm in the academy and not out there in the political realm like all of you and have to face the voters, I want to put some pretty important and bold ideas on the table that over the long term, I think the state absolutely just needs to consider if we're going to make any changes in this dramatic affordability problem. We've got to take a look at our taxation policy and the number of ways to target revenue to more cost-effective solutions. And I've put two ideas up here. One is recalibrating the mortgage interest deduction and other regressive tax measures, and I'm going to show you a slide in a minute. And then really looking at ways to reform Prop 13 to deal with the fact that many people like me, and I'm going to, and probably most of you, I've owned my home in California now for 30 years. I've had outsized equity gains through no contribution of my own, and yet I feel as if we built a wall around California as a result of this situation where existing homeowners benefit from the fact that they're getting higher home prices and higher equity, and yet my children who grew up in California, unless they decide to become tech tycoons, are really not going to be able to afford to raise a family in at least the Bay Area and California. So one idea here about changing this is California on the mortgage interest deduction, capital gains exclusion, real property taxes, those highlighted areas. This is money that California is not receiving, $8 billion a year in revenue with very modest changes to the California, and this is the California mortgage interest deduction and capital gains and property tax exclusions. This is on top of what homeowners are getting on their federal tax returns. And so just very modest changes in this mortgage interest deduction could fund, you know, that $300 million for the state, leveraging the state tax credit or other kinds of funding that would expand the pot of money to be used for targeted first-time homebuyer assisted, targeted rental assistance. And these are the kinds of things that I think over the long term we really need to look at as a state, or my fear is that we are not going to solve this dramatic inequality and lack of affordability in the state. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions afterward.
Okay, thank you. Richard, welcome.